The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. The canvas above my bunk leaked in small drops, tapping rhythmically onto the wooden floor. I hadn't slept much, not because of the storm, but because of him. Private Thomas Keller. I write his name slowly, deliberately, as if giving it weight might bring him back. I met Thomas during my first week on the front. He was assigned to our medical post after a skirmish that left shrapnel buried near his ribs. He was different from the others. Quiet, not shy, but watchful. Most soldiers joked, bragged, flirted. Not Thomas. He sat by the tent's entrance, always watching the sky as if listening to something only he could hear. I was the one who cleaned his wounds. The moment our eyes met, I felt it. A pull. Not romantic. Not yet. Just human. He never spoke much. But when he did, he asked me questions no one else did. Do you ever dream of leaving all this? Do you believe there's a place where it's quiet? His voice was low, tired, and every word felt like a secret. Sometimes after lights out, I'd find him awake, staring out of the tent. He once whispered, "The silence after gunfire. It's the loneliest sound." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with him. That became our thing. No words. Just presence. But things changed the day we were bombed. Shells rained down like fire from the sky. I remember grabbing my medical bag and running straight into the chaos. Screams, smoke, blood. And Thomas. He was helping carry a wounded boy from the wreckage. He shouldn't have been out there. Not with his side barely healed. I saw the blast before I heard it, and when the smoke cleared, he was gone. I searched for him for days. Every corner of the camp, every medical tent. But Thomas was nowhere. The war moved fast, like a river dragging everything in its path. Letters came and went, but none mentioned him. I felt a hollow ache, like a part of me was lost in that endless battlefield. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I found a letter addressed to me. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. It was from Thomas. He wrote about the fear in his heart, the weight of survival, and how seeing me had given him a sliver of hope. He never said it outright, but I knew. He had fallen in love with me. But my heart was guarded. I couldn't afford distractions, not in this war zone. Still, his words stayed with me, a quiet flame in the cold nights. Days passed, and the war's horrors only deepened. I saved lives, buried others, and tried to keep the hope alive, for my patients and for myself. Thomas's letter was my secret refuge. Then, one night a whisper came through the camp, a rumor that he had been captured, prisoner of war. The thought crushed me. Would I ever see him again? Would the war let us live a normal life? I held on to hope, even as everything around me crumbled. Weeks turned into months. The camp felt like a ghost town of memories and scars. Every dawn was a battle against despair. I kept writing in my journal, my only way to hold on to sanity. 1. Morning. While tending to the wounded, a soldier stumbled into the tent, eyes wild with exhaustion and pain. He carried a message. Thomas was alive, but barely. A prisoner in a camp miles away, weak and broken, but alive. Hope sparked anew. I knew I had to see him no matter the cost. With help from a few brave souls, I arranged a risky mission to cross enemy lines. The journey was perilous, every step weighed down by fear and doubt. Yet the thought of Thomas kept me moving forward. After days of treacherous travel, I reached the camp. It was a place of shadows and silence. I found him in a makeshift infirmary, fragile but fighting. Our eyes met. And in that moment, the war around us faded away. He reached for my hand, his grip weak but full of meaning. I stayed by his side, nursing him back from the brink. We spoke little, but every glance and touch spoke volumes. Even though I couldn't return his love, I gave him something precious: hope. And in the midst of war's chaos, that hope was a lifeline. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments, shared stories, faint smiles, and a bond forged in fire. I learned that sometimes love is not about being together, but about holding on to each other when everything else is lost. The camp was never truly safe. Every day brought new challenges, new losses. Thomas grew stronger, but the war never stopped calling. One evening, under a sky heavy with stars and silence, he confided in me. "I don't expect anything from you," he said softly. "Just promise me you'll survive this." Those words stayed with me, an anchor in the storm. Our time together was fleeting, but it changed everything. I realized that courage wasn't just about facing the enemy on the battlefield. It was about facing the heart's pain, the unbearable, uncertainty. I watched him leave one morning, his figure disappearing into the mist. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. But in that goodbye, I found strength. Strength to keep fighting, to keep healing others, to keep writing my story. Because sometimes the greatest battles are fought within, and sometimes the bravest hearts don't wear medals. They just keep going. My journal remained my refuge. Through every tear, every scar, every lost hope, I wrote not just to remember, but to survive, and to remind anyone who reads this that even in the darkest wars, there's a light that won't go out. Days turned into weeks, and the war dragged on mercilessly. I saw faces etched with fear and hope, pain and resilience. Each patient was a story, a flicker of humanity in the chaos. Thomas's memory was a silent comfort, a quiet courage I carried inside. One night, the camp was under heavy fire. The ground shook. The air was thick with smoke and screams. I ran through the darkness, clutching medical supplies, searching for survivors. Amid the chaos, I found a young soldier, barely breathing, clutching a faded photo. His eyes met mine, full of trust and fear. I did everything I could, every bandage, every word, every breath, to save him. But sometimes, even hope isn't enough. As dawn broke, the silence was deafening. We lost many that night, and yet somehow life pressed on. The war wasn't just around us. It was inside us. I learned that healing wasn't just about mending wounds. It was about holding on to humanity in a world that seemed to lose it. And through it all, I kept writing, because stories are how we survive, because stories are how we remember what it means to be human. Months later, the war's end was whispered like a fragile dream. The fighting had slowed, but the scars remained, both seen and unseen. I stood among the rubble of what was once a village, now silent except for the wind. The faces of those I lost haunted me, but also reminded me why I had to keep going. Thomas's memory felt like a light in the darkness, a reminder that even in war, kindness can survive. As we prepared to leave, I found a small tattered journal among the ruins, someone's story left behind. I held it close, knowing that every life mattered, every story deserved to be told. And mine? It was just beginning. The journey back home was quiet, too quiet after the chaos of war. The landscape had changed, but so had I. Each step forward felt heavy with memories I couldn't shake. I thought about Thomas often, his gentle smile, his silent strength. How a man at war could show so much compassion. It was something I clung to in the darkest nights. Reunited with family, the world seemed brighter. But inside, a storm raged on. War leaves marks on the soul, invisible to others but impossible to ignore. I found solace in writing, pouring every heartbreak, every hope onto paper. My diary became a sanctuary, a way to heal slowly, piece by piece. And though the battlefield was behind me, the war within was far from over. Months turned into years, but the echoes of war stayed with me. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I would feel Thomas's presence, as if he was still watching over me. I kept his letter close, the only tangible proof of our brief, impossible connection. He had once told me that hope could survive anywhere, even in the darkest trenches. I believed him, because in the midst of destruction, small acts of kindness became lifelines. Even when the world seemed broken, humanity could still shine through. And that belief carried me forward, through sleepless nights and restless days. My story, like so many others, was just a single thread in the vast tapestry of war, but it was mine to tell, and I would tell it as long as I had breath. Returning to the hospital after the war was surreal. The building was still standing, but it felt different, quieter, empty. I walked the halls, where once the cries of pain and hope had filled the air. Now, silence lingered, like a ghost of what used to be. I found some of my old medical supplies, untouched and waiting. Memories flooded back, the patients, the sacrifices, the moments of despair and triumph. I realized then that healing didn't end with the war. There were wounds no medicine could reach, and scars no bandage could cover. But I had learned that sometimes the greatest healing came from connection, from compassion. Even after all the chaos, the promise of care remained. And so, I decided to dedicate my life to helping others heal. Not just their bodies, but their hearts as well. Years passed, and the world slowly rebuilt itself from the ruins of war. But the stories we lived and the lessons we learned never faded. I often think about Thomas, the soldier who cared for me when I felt most vulnerable. Though our paths diverged, his kindness stayed with me, a reminder of the humanity that war tries to steal, but can never truly destroy. Today, I share my story not for glory or fame, but to honor those who fought, those who suffered, and those who loved in the midst of chaos. War changes everything, but it cannot erase the strength of the human spirit. And as long as I can speak, I will tell the truth of those days, the silent battles, and the quiet moments of hope. Because every story deserves to be remembered, and every voice deserves to be heard.